What's up, everybody? Welcome to Away Games, a Chicago Cubs podcast hosted by two comedians from New York who love the Cubs. I'm Adam Mamawala. I'm one of them. I'm here, as always, with Kevin McCaffrey. And we are, I'm sorry, Kevin?
No, that's it. Adam, that's everything I wanted to say today. You gave me all the room I needed to get in and establish myself as a character. What's up? I'm Kevin. We have
that is Kevin. I'm Adam, and we are here today joined by former Cubs pitcher, current Orioles pitcher, and also World Series champion Rob Zastryzny. How's it going, man?
And it's going good. Wish baseball started back up, but other than that, can't complain.
So do we, and we are not even people who play baseball for a living. So I can imagine that that you feel that way. The first thing I have to ask you is, how did I do with your last name?
Perfect. Yeah, it's at this point my standards are so low. I take pretty much anything. Yeah, yours were good. It was a lot worse when I was younger. I used to take offense to it. I was like, oh, they don't know who I am or whatever it is. But now I just realize it's like I didn't say it till the fourth grade. So
you didn't say your own name till the fourth grade.
No, I couldn't at all.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's that, you usually don't have to go full last name in grade school right away, unless there's like a bunch of Robs, like on The Bachelor when they'll have like Chrissy S, Chrissy T, will be all the different characters. But because
I'm a fellow crazy last name person. It's actually very phonetic, but people, when they see it, they like freak out because of all the A's. So I was going to ask you, like, what is, in your professional career that you can recall, what is like the most ridiculous way somebody's, like an announcer at a stadium, has pronounced your name?
I actually told this to Tim Kirchin. He interviewed me on my birthday, believe it or not. And
nice.
I was in high school. I was number 10, and I was playing first base. So I stepped up to the plate. They're now batting number 10, Rob Zastryzny. And so the guy's like, Rob Zinskinsky or something terrible. And so in high school, I guess that mattered. So the parents go up to the press box, and they're like, hey, it's Zastryzny. And he's like, okay, I got it. So second time up, number 10, Rob Zastryzny. And sure enough, another parent goes up and is like, it's Zastryzny, make sure you get it right. And the third at bat comes up, and they're like, now batting number 10, Rob Smith. That was the end of it.
That's pretty solid. He chose to get a name right. It wasn't you, but he nailed it.
If I'm a high school announcer and I have parents telling me like how to phonetically pronounce a name, I'm just going to do something else.
Yeah, that guy's not getting paid enough to pronounce his Zastryzny properly.
I did PA stuff just at my senior year for the baseball team. I mainly played basketball, but I had a bunch of friends on the baseball team, and I think I got $10 per game, so it wasn't quite enough to dive deep into the research early.
Not worth it at all.
That's just enough to pronounce Smith properly and nothing more.
Exactly.
We're both comedians, and I've dealt with the same thing my entire career. People introducing me don't know how to pronounce my name, and I had one guy last year who had me keep saying my last name like a million times, and then introduces me as Andrew Mamawala. So he just nails my last name and completely forgets the ordinary first name that goes in front of it. But I feel like Len Casper would always call you Rob Z. So I don't know how much he tried.
My personal favorite, Dodgers. Name escapes me right now. Their legendary announcer.
Oh, Scully?
There we go.
Vince Scully, yeah.
It's my first season. I think it's my third appearance or second appearance, or third. So I threw twice in Colorado for my debut, and then we went to LA. And I go out there and I throw the game. I throw pretty well. And after the game, a bunch of people kept coming up to me, reporters and everything, were like, hey, like, you need to listen to the broadcast. Like, you need to do this. And so I guess after my first pitch, he's like, Rob Zastryzny, and he goes, I hope you guys don't mind if I just call him Rob Z. And from then on out, I was Rob Z the rest of my professional career.
Oh, that's lovely.
Awesome.
I mean, just to hear Vince Scully say your name is cool enough, I feel like.
That was pretty cool. And like every now and then you get starstruck. Like in the Chicago Cubs clubhouse, there's always guys rolling through, and eventually you become a little numb to it. But then something like personal comes in. Like Dodgeball is my favorite movie of all time. Mm-hmm. So when Vince Vaughn rolls into the clubhouse, I literally couldn't look at him in the face without like either laughing or like staring at him like I was a crazy person. And just when something affects you personally. So I grew up listening to Vince Scully. I wasn't particularly a Dodgers fan, but you watch enough baseball, you hear everybody. Mm-hmm. And then, when I went back and listened to the broadcast, like when he said my name, it just reminded me of all the names I've heard him say in the past. And so it's stuff like that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, well, it's basically like if you have like the MLB video game and you do the create a player when you're a kid. You
Yeah.
can never get the real announcers to say your actual name. So it's really like the real life version of the video game.
Yeah.
Being like, oh man, that really sounds like Vin Scully said my whole extremely uncommon last name. That's an awesome. That should just be your ringtone. Really, that's awesome.
That's actually a good point. It'd probably get annoying eventually, but I definitely would think about using it for a couple days. And that's another thing. The video game is I got the video game. I took all the pictures. They had like 1,000 cameras, and they turn you, and it's this whole 3D shot. And I'm like, this is awesome. I'm being the video game. So I had a pretty good season with Chicago. I think I ended with somewhere around like a 1 ERA. So I'm like, yeah, I'll be pretty good.
Yeah. I
show up, I log onto the game, and I look at my stats, and it's like out of 100, it's like fastball 31. I think my guy's 41 overall, and I'm looking at him like, this guy's terrible. But my stamina was like a 98. So
you could go all 9 innings terrible.
The conditioning you've got fine.
But I'm just terrible.
That is fun. I mean, it's funny because there has to be humans whose job is to analyze and pass along the ratings like this, so that there's someone who saw, and your ERA was 1 something. I like the ERA plus. It was like 370, like or something. It's like 270% better than league average or whatever. But someone had to be watching and be like, no, I'm not believing these numbers, but this guy can go forever. And I would love to see what made him.
I know.
Think that.
I think it's all one day because not that I think he's wrong. It's just like I love that the stamina is like super above average. It's like, hey, you want a CG? Like he's gonna give up 10, but he'll give it to you.
Yeah, exactly. He's gonna save the bullpen for. You can bring him in after any doubleheader.
I have to imagine that Vince Vaughn is one of the only celebrities who walks into a baseball clubhouse and is taller than most of the players.
Oh yeah, he's massive. He's huge, and he walked in. I'm sitting there eating by myself because like when you're in the big leagues, there's a lot of nerves that go along with it.
Mm-hmm.
And like when you're first there, you find yourself in the cafeteria a lot. You're like sitting in your locker like this, like looking around. I'm just gonna go eat food.
Yeah,
like, that's what my body wants me to do. So I'll just go sit in the cafeteria. So I'm there by myself. It's a couple hours before the game. Everybody else is doing something on their own. And he's like, "Hey, do you mind if I sit with you?" I was like, "Do you want me to leave?" I'll leave if you want. He's like, "No, dude, you're good." And he talked to me like super normal guy, awesome dude. And I was like, hey, man, like, I don't want to fanboy because I know you get this probably Starbucks, every place you go, if you can even go anywhere. I was like, but dodgeball is my all-time favorite, like, comedy. I was like, it might be dumb to other people, but I think it's the funniest thing. I didn't say this to him, but I think it's the funniest movie I've ever seen. And he was like, honestly, man, that was one of the most fun shooting times I've ever had in my whole life. And we talked about it for 30 seconds, and I was like, that's it. No more questions.
Well, that's great. And I mean, I think that's a thing you guys, just as professional athletes, run into a lot, where you guys are around people who other people get starstruck by all the time. But if you see someone outside your industry, it's weird and different. It's like Adam and I are comedians, so like we hang out with everyone in the comedy world. But then I had to go do something at WWE Network once. Like I was doing a sketch with them, and just seeing wrestlers around was stars. Like I got starstruck from them. Like, that's the Godfather. That's the pimp character from the 90s. I know this dude. This is crazy. I'm eating lunch with him. That's much more insane than like seeing Seinfeld around.
To me, like, if I saw Seinfeld, I'd freak out. But to you, it's like, you know what? He's a comedian. There he is. Yeah.
He's around. Yeah. And Vince Vaughn, same thing, where it's like he's fanboying out because he's there. He doesn't have work to do at Wrigley, you know.
That's true. And like that's kind of John Lovitz was my first pitch catch. They're like, hey, Rob, do you want to catch first pitch? And I'm like, oh, I wonder who it is. And they're like, John Lovitz. I was like, yeah, like, I'd love to do it. And so I'm sitting there talking to him, and he's talking to me, and I'm like, hey, like, I'm trying to act normal around the guy. And we call him Big Jim. He's the guy who kind of sets up all the player and first pitch celebrity interactions and stuff.
Sure.
And I'm talking to him. I'm like, hey, man, do I look nervous or anything? Like, I'm trying to be as normal as I can. And he tells John, because I guess they're friends, he's like, hey, man, like, he's nervous to talk to you. And John goes, are you kidding me? He's like, you're a professional baseball player. I can't even look you in the eye. I'm so nervous. I was like, come on. It's just crazy. Different circles makes it a different thing.
Oh, absolutely. It's where when a while back I opened for John Lovitz at a casino, and it was the first time I had ever opened for him, and I was like, hey, thanks for having me. And he was like, oh, I didn't pick you. the booker picked you. I'm like, I know we've never spoken before, John. I understand someone else did this. I'm saying thanks anyway, but that's also a weird thing that when you get called up, and like you said, because you got called up for the first time, you made your major league debut in 2016 with that Cubs team, right?
Yes.
So it's like, I mean, first of all, how is it going from the minors to not just like, I mean, making your debut for any team is massive, but like what was clearly that league's juggernaut that year?
Where they could do no wrong. If you go back and watch those games, it's like the year Lester drops down a sack bunt, walk off in the 13th inning. It's Javi Baez is doing stuff that no human's ever done before. And you're looking at it, it's like they have this vibe rolling that you do not want to disrupt. So my first day in the big leagues, like Joe Madden pulls me to the office. He's like, what are your goals, aspirations for the season? And I was like, I want to do my job on the field, but most importantly, I do not want to mess this up in any way, shape, or form. And he was like, okay, just be you. Like the worst thing you can do is try to, be someone you're not, try to like ruin the vibe by like trying to stay out of people's way. Then they're like, what's this kid's problem?
Right.
So,
Which is, but then I'd imagine it's the difficult thing when you're thinking about not effing up. It's like, well, now that's all I feel like I'm going to do. It's hard. It's hard to, it's an easier said than done thing, I'd imagine.
Was there anybody? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It's incredible to me because like I showed up and I was like, I got to pitch in the big leagues. This is something I've never done. I actually never been to a big league spring training game. So I started the year in Double-A, so I'd never faced big leaguers other than like a rehab guy. And I don't know if you know anything about it, but they don't care. Like Josh Reddick, and I love this story. Josh Reddick's hitting, and he's with the Athletics at the time, and he's wearing the one ear flap. So he steps in the box. I'm like, oh, that's a one ear flap. I haven't even seen that before in my life. And I don't remember if he got a hit or grounded out or something. He hit the ball hard on the ground, and he goes in the dugout, and he's just in between innings, like smoking a heater in the dugout. This guy does not care at all. Like, he's just waiting to get back to the big leagues. So it was my first taste of big leagues ever. And so I was worried about that. And then my first BP, I'm out there and guys are hitting homers. I'm looking around at Coors Field, whatever it is. And they are like, hey, when we get on the bus from San Diego to LA, you're going to have to sing a song in front of the whole team, or you're going to have to do something along those lines. And I was more nervous for that than I was to pitch in the games, and it was perfect. It like took all of the weight of performing away because I was like, man, like I have to sing something or dance or do something stupid, and then you just go do your job. And that I think that's why that team was so good is they did a great job of like I was a young guy who came in, and the first person who talked to me was Ben Zobrist. He goes, "Hey, we're really glad to have you, Ron." And I was like, "You know who I am?"
That's awesome.
It just made you feel immediately like you were on that team.
Yeah, I have to ask, what song did you sing on the bus?
I sang "Fishing in the Dark" was my first one, and then "Your Man" by Josh Turner.
You got an encore. That's pretty solid.
I did too. So "Fishing in the Dark" they loved, and I didn't have to go sit. So they call it going to sit in the bathroom, but they say a different word. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to cut on here.
Yeah, you can say whatever. Yeah.
So if you do terribly, everyone's like, "Hey, go to the shitter. You got to go sit in the bus bathroom." And so they're like, "Hey, great job!" Everyone high-fived me. I sat down. The second one I did, I got 3 lines into the song, was doing okay, and they're like, "Hey, cut it out." And I was like, "What did I do?" And they're like, "Did you go to the shitter last time?" I was like, "No." They're like, "Okay, spend the rest of the ride in there." And it was from Pittsburgh Airport to the hotel, which was like 32 minutes. So I was sitting in the bathroom in the thing. And
so actually in the bathroom, not like just next to it, in the bathroom.
In the bathroom by yourself. And it's just like some fun stuff they do. And it was predestined. They're like, okay, we've let them off easy. Let's get after them a little bit. And that's another thing is like my first start was in Pittsburgh, and they made me all the rookies wear the cheerleader outfit. I have a great picture of it. It's hilarious.
Oh, sure.
We had a great time. And then now there's no more like hazing, stuff like that. But part of that I get. The other part, like I loved it. Like you felt like so involved in the team. Like Lackey walked us from the hotel to the field, and we were all wearing cheerleader outfits, and he was getting people to take pictures of us. It was so much fun.
Lackey, I feel like in the video game, I feel like Lackey would have a 100 hazing rating. Like if I just had to guess.
Yeah, he would have that hazing rating, and then like you wouldn't be allowed to pull him out of a game.
Yes, right. He would be stamina or not. He's going 9 every single time.
It's like, it's not your choice. He comes up when he wants to.
Yeah. Well, yes. Exactly.
So you mentioned that Zobrist was really cool to you when you came up. Who else do you remember kind of like taking you under their wing? And then on the other side, who were you most intimidated to talk to? Because it seems like the consensus from all the young Cubs players is like, I was afraid to talk to Lester.
Yeah, it's Lester, 100%.
Yeah.
And he's not an approachable guy. Like, he's so fun to talk to once you know him. But I always felt like he was the alpha of the clubhouse, and the last thing I wanted to do was like get under his skin, because like he was that type of player where he's so good, he's so talented, he's the rock of that clubhouse. Or like, if you annoy him enough, they might just send you to Iowa. Like, okay, go ahead and get him out of here. So I was like,
right.
on his good side, and I thought the way to do it was just not talk to him. I think it worked out. I think me and him have a pretty good relationship.
Right. We have yet to say a word, but yeah, I think we're good. Yeah.
You ask him about me, be like, I think I remember that kid. I'm pretty sure I know him, and that's perfect. That's exactly what I want.
Absolutely. That's great.
Do you remember other folks besides Zobrist kind of like being like approaching you or mentoring you in any way?
Yeah, and Kyle Hendricks, I think he's only a year or two older than me, but he's been there for a while. And if I had any questions, he's probably the most approachable human in the world. Like, me and him would be at Starbucks or something, or we'd be at walking from the field or whatever, and someone would be like, Kyle, autograph. And he'd be like, yeah, sure. When he would there talk to people, they'd be like, well, what's it like being a big leaguer? Which is probably an annoying question after a while.
Right.
And he'd be like, it's great. Thank you for asking. Like, super polite, like the most approachable guy in the world. And he kind of taught me how to do everything the right way. And guys like that, Mike Montgomery was another good one, because he was relatively new to the team at the time. I think he'd been there a couple months.
Yeah.
And so he kind of talked me through how to like go from, like, I'm going from AAA to the big leagues, but he was going from the Mariners to the Cubs. And he was telling me how like to transfer the type of vibe from one team to another, and how to kind of stay out of people's way, and also like contribute to that like team bonding and team vibe that they have.
Yeah. It's interesting to hear that perspective, like you say, both from the majors and from the minors, and how much of your stress as a ball player, or how much, mental space that must take up, just trying, as you say, not to fuck things up there, and just to be able to like be, are we cool with everybody? But it seems like from what you're saying, it was a relatively approachable clubhouse in general with that group.
If I could go back in time, I wouldn't have even thought twice about it. I would have shown up, been myself from day one, and everyone would have accepted me. But truly, they're a great group of guys. Like, between Anthony Rizzo and Chris Bryant, like, they're truly best friends in real life and on the field, and like, they'll take care of you. And the best part about that clubhouse was, if you messed up or you did something stupid, they would just tell you. Like, it's not like you mess up and Rizzo would turn to Chris and be like, this guy's an idiot. Like, he would literally come up to you and be like, you're an idiot.
Yeah.
And that, like, you have to respect that, because it's so, like, there's no like him talking to him about you who's going to the manager, and then the manager's got to come to you. It was literally, if they had a problem with you, they'd come tell you. If you read David Ross's book, there's a page of me in there, and it's he talks about this time that I threw the 10th and the 11th inning against San Francisco, and it was tied 2-2. I finished it like, Rob, you're done. I think they brought in Chapman or Stroke or somebody. And so I go back to the clubhouse. I do my shoulder work. I take my uniform off like you're supposed to. And then if you end up going back out after, you just throw like a little BP top on. And you wander back out and you watch the game. So I finish my shoulder work. As soon as I finish my shoulder work, I plop my jersey off. I sit down for the first time after the outing. And like, pitching in the big leagues takes a lot out of you, because there's so much adrenaline, and then you're coming down off that adrenaline. And so I sit down for a second, and David Ross strolls in, and he's like, as he's walking into the clubhouse, he's like, it's a tie game in the 13th. We're playing the team that won the World Series however many years ago. He's like, we need your ass out there right now. And he looks around, and it's Lester, Lackey, Arrieta, and me. So
God.
Like, you get your ass back out there. I freak out. I put Matt Caesar's jersey on.
Everyone's using this stuff.
Bats jersey. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone uses Caesar stuff. So I grab his jersey, I throw it on, I'm running out. And I'm like, I can't go out in his jersey. Like, everyone will be able to see it. So I turn right back around. I don't have my jersey because I just threw it in the laundry. So I throw my BP top on. I just remember going to the end of the dugout and just being as quiet as I could the rest of the game, trying not to do anything. But yeah, it was great because after that, like the next day I rolled into the club, I was thinking like, oh, I pissed David Ross off. That's the worst thing you can do in the whole world.
Mhm.
And he walked up to me, he's like, Rob Z, good morning. You need a coffee? You need anything? And I was like, no, I'm good. And he's like, all right, man, have a good day. And that was the end of it.
Wow. So given that experience, having played with him in 2016, I know you're not with the team anymore, but you kind of could feel that he had like some manager vibes at that time, right? Yeah.
100%. I honestly felt that he was more of a coach than a player. Not that he didn't contribute a ton. Like obviously he was Lester's guy and he hit the big home run in the World Series, but he, on his days off that he didn't play, was essentially he was out there watching guys take BP. He was watching Wilson catch. He was going over scouting reports to help Wilson go over. Like he was doing more than probably anyone else. He was essentially a player coach, and he was doing a great job. And he's another reason. And I'm excited to see how he does as a manager. And I think the one thing for me that I thought of was like him and John Lester were best friends, and him and like Lackey were really good friends, and everyone loved him. And so it's like having that relationship with those guys and then being their coach. And so I think he's going to do a great job. And from what I heard from some of the guys, that it was like a great transition. So I'm excited to see what he does.
Thank God he never had to deal with trying to take Lackey out of a game.
Oh man, I have nightmares about having to do that. You know, some people, oh, I was getting chased by a demon. I'm like, I had to go take John Lackey out in the 8th.
Yeah, you're having night terrors about John Lackey.
Yeah, look that up on dreaminterpreter.com. It's just like, no, it's actually, it doesn't signify anything. It means you're actually scared of what's happening. Literal.
I've been looking forward to the eye roll that he's going to get from Lester the first time he has to walk out and take him out from a game.
Oh yeah, that's going to be a good one for sure. Although I think he's just going to send the pitching coach. He's going to
yeah, we've spent enough time together. This is someone else's job now. And that team carried 3 catchers. Obviously, what was the difference in mound visit style across the 3 of them between Ross, Montero, Contreras? Was there significant? What were the differences in how they approached pitchers?
That's a great question, actually, because there is 3 different ones. So Wilson, I've had my whole career. Like I had him in low A all the way up to the big league. And honestly, in low A, he was a pretty good player. You could see the talent. And then in high A, it was like, I think he hit like 250, and he was pretty good, but he was kind of overshadowed a little bit by a guy like Schwarber. We had Daniel Vogelback, Albert Almora. Mm-hmm. And not that he was overshadowed, it just like he didn't stand out. And then he went to winter ball, came back to double A, and he was the best player in the league. Mm-hmm. And from then on out, he had that confidence going. So I think he's a big confidence, like he believes that if you just outwork or outwill yourself, you can beat anyone in the whole world. And so that's what his mound visit was. Like I'd be like struggling in the 5th inning, bases loaded. He's like, "Hey, you're better than this guy. Go get him." And then he'd like punch me in the chest and walk off.
Yeah, that seems right.
Okay, I got it. And Montero was like, for him, it's simple. Like him and Ross both were they kept it simple. Because the worst thing you can do is walk out and be like, "Hey, I don't know what to go here with you. There's a lefty." And then I'm starting to think about everything. And I'm like, who's warming up in the pen? What's going on? But David Ross and them are like, "Hey, you have a good cutter. He can't hit a cutter down and in. Let's go there, see what happens." And then it's simple. But Montero's was a little more direct. He's like, "Throw a cutter here. You got him." And he'd walk off.
Rob, we are good. That's all.
Yeah. Hashtag.
You are good. Let's go.
Yeah.
Ross was like, he was very intellectual and made you feel great about it. He'd be like, "What do you want to throw here?" And I'd be like, "Oh, I want to go heater in." He's like, "I'd rather go cutter." And you'd be like, "You know what? You're right. Let's do that."
Yeah, he lulls you into thinking you have an option and then tells you what you're actually going to throw.
So I chose the cutter, not him, but he really chose it in the long run.
That's great.
Yeah, that's it. They're all great. And Montero had some big moments. Obviously, probably the biggest moment was that ground ball through short where we got the insurance run, which everyone shows the Ben Zobrist highlight, which is incredible. Like jumping into second base. But that run didn't win the game. The Montero run did. So.
Yeah. Absolutely. It is one of those like historically overlooked plays now, because it's like the bases were loaded but it was obviously for understandable reasons being conservative about sending guys. And that one run was huge. And Montero had one of the, also everyone knows the Rizzo hands on the helmet and the oh my God, but also Montero had one of my favorite lip readings at first base after he had that hit. You can see him say, "What a fucking game," by himself, just to nobody, which I feel like never gets played. And it's such a great insight for how like you guys are out there on the field, but like having the a lot of the same exact thoughts that we're having at home. You know?
No, yeah, and that's a great insight. That's why I like mic'd up players, because you saw Chris
That was the best. Yeah, that was great.
It was awesome. And then you're thinking, oh, they're mic'd up, they're showing out. That's literally them every day. Like,
yeah.
And it's awesome that people get to see that, because there are guys, like, if you mic'd me up, I'd be walking around kind of forcing conversations just so there's content to be had.
Sure, yeah, you're thinking about the production, yeah.
The last thing they want to hear is me singing a rap song in my head while I'm shagging BP. Like, they want me to go talk to somebody. You know?
Right.
So
I'll tell you what, having worked as a producer some places, if you're just rapping in the outfield by yourself, that's getting in. That's going to be a transition cut that we're going to use too.
But yeah, it's crazy that's just what guys are like. And if you talk to me about, like, what's it like being a Cub or an Oriole or a Dodger or anything like that, it's not too much different, because all guys are pretty much the same in the baseball world. We've all grown up with the same, like, we all played high school ball, we all traveled in the summers, we all played college ball, or guys went straight to pros. We've all been through the grind of the minor league. So if you haven't been humbled, you will be soon. That's just how baseball works. So most of the guys are, and, like, it's a great group. Like, that Cubs group is great. I know they still have a great group. Like, the Orioles group, I was nervous. It was my first spring training with a new team, and I rolled in that. And I'm kind of a quirky dude, as far as, like, I say really dumb things a lot for fun. And when you know that I'm doing it for fun, like, it's very funny. And people are like, oh, this guy's a clown. Like, he's funny. But when you don't, I look like an idiot. And so
Sure.
But when I first got drafted, my nicknames were Cavs and Friday, because I threw Friday nights at Missouri, and I have really small calves.
Okay, I was gonna say calves, like the muscle. Yes,
I like the muscle, and not in a good way. And so people still to this day, like, my college teammates would be like, "Hey, how are the Cavs doing?" Because, like, I would talk about them so often that it was funny, because they're terrible. And so,
sure.
Yeah.
A 31 ranking on MLB The Show. Yeah.
If there were Cavs still, man, I would have been a 38 instead of 40. Yeah, so some kid asked me, he's like, "Hey, what were your nicknames?" So I tell him, I'm like, "Oh, because I have huge calves." And obviously joking around, everyone's like, "Yeah," and they can see that I don't. And I say, "Friday," like, "No, you had some other ones." And I was like, "Well, other than the obvious, like, superstar, like, greatest that's ever lived," like, and I go on. And so everyone's pitching in ideas like, "Oh, like, this the greatest, and oh, like, the best ever," and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And, one of the names thrown out was Phenom, and I was like, yeah, they called me Phenom too. And, like, we're all having a good time laughing. And so some kid walks by and he hears me call myself the Phenom, so he goes to short season the next day, and he's like, "Hey, this kid Rob Zastryzny calls himself the Phenom and makes everybody else call him that." And so my first year of pro ball was miserable.
Oh, God.
So this was right after you got drafted?
Right after, yeah.
Okay, yeah, that is. I mean, yeah, that's throwing down some good Wilson Contreras style confidence off the bat for sure. And now in Baltimore, you have, like, Brandon Hyde is sort of a connection, right?
Yeah. So Brandon Hyde and Tim Cousins are over there, and then Flores is he was the infield coordinator with the Cubs. He's now the infield coordinator over there. So I showed up over there, and the first, like, 4 guys I met, 3 of them were Cubs related, and I was like, "Oh, this is nice." Like, it's that feel of, like, I know people and everything. And, like, my meeting with Brandon Hyde was great. He's like, "Rob, I know what you're all about. I know what you bring to the table. I look to see what you're doing now and what changes you've made, and, like, let's get going." And so it's very simple. Like, there's no get to know you process, because I know him already. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, I was just like, "Yeah, good to see you again, Phenom."
Yeah, if he would have said that, I probably would have died laughing.
Yeah, I mean, you got your Players Week jersey, good to go. Right, go out there, Phenom on the back.
The 1% of the population that knows that joke, the rest will be like, "That's hilarious," and the other 9.5 would be like, "This kid."
Sure.
And that's usually what happens.
We'll up those numbers by several hundred people today, and then we'll get it burning.
Well, we won't keep you too much longer, but we do, of course, have to talk to you about what that experience was like with that team in the playoffs. I know you're on the NLCS roster, and I assume obviously you're with the team the entire time. Like, what is your memory of that? Is it as magical as it was for us watching it as fans, or what do you remember most about that time?
Honestly, I'd love to hear your perspective on it, because I don't get to talk to people. They always ask me mine, but as far as mine goes, it was very quick. Like, we went down 3-1 immediately. And then I show up to the field. I'm not on the roster, but I was like, if Schwarber's ACL acts up, you're going back on.
Right.
And
Okay. Yeah.
keep growing, make sure you're okay. And I don't know if I would have gone on, but I think me, Joe Smith, and Trevor Cahill were all waiting around. I think Jason Hamill was too. And we're all waiting around to see who they needed. So if they needed a lefty, it would have been me. If they needed a righty, like one guy, Joe Smith. If they needed a long relief, Cahill probably, or
Right.
whatever. So we're all sitting around waiting. And I show up to the clubhouse, and I'm like, I don't understand the gravity of it. And that's probably for the best. And I don't think a lot of us did.
Oh, yeah.
And I think if we understood what it actually meant, it would have turned out a lot different, because it was almost like 3-1. It was like, what else we got to lose?
Right.
Like, it doesn't matter anymore. Like,
Yeah.
we're going to go out there, and Rizzo's playing Rocky in the clubhouse. And like, he changed his walkout to the Rocky theme, which I thought was hilarious.
Oh, yeah.
Stuff like that, to where it's like, if you think about us doing that at the time, you're like, these kids don't care about anything. Like, there's so much riding on this, and they're watching Rocky before the game.
Yeah.
But it helped us. It helped us, like, lift that weight off our shoulders. And I remember right before the series, we beat the Dodgers. I was still on the roster until Schwarber was cleared.
Okay.
So,
Gotcha. Yeah.
yes, I was on the roster until game 1, where I got a phone call in the morning. I actually did an interview with Brad Lidge, and he was like, hey, you're still on the roster. Like, you looking forward to pitching? I was like, yeah, it'd be a dream come true. And then as soon as I hung up the phone, I was like, what an interview. And then I got a call, and they're like, hey, you're off the roster. It's like, yeah, it was just like, we definitely didn't understand. So we were going through it, and I remember Albert Almora had the best quote that I'll never forget in life. And I love Albert. He's one of my better friends in the whole world. But he when they hit the homer to go to tie the game in the 8th, is the 8th, right?
Yeah.
See, it's all blurred to me right now. I don't know what it was. The 8th inning, and he turned and he goes, maybe this curse thing is real.
Yeah.
Essentially, it was a Rajay Davis choked up halfway up the bat. Like, the last thing we thought he was going to do was hit a homer.
Right.
Like, we were like, he might pound one through the 4-hole or do something like that. And he just somehow lifts one out to left. And he looks at me and he's like, that should not have happened. Maybe this thing is real. And I remember thinking to myself, like, that's like when it all hit me. It was so heavy. I literally, like, as soon as the rain delayed, like, everyone go to the clubhouse. I was like, I don't know if I can make it back that far.
Right, just physically. Yeah. Yeah.
But I assume, were you there during the rain delay?
Yeah.
What was that moment like?
That was basically
more of it, Hayward.
That was taking the most demoralized group of people on the entire planet, that probably in the entire world. Like, for that minute to 2 minutes after that happened, they say, oh, the energy was sucked out of the stadium, and you're like, okay, there's still energy. Like, it was literally sucked out of the dugout. Like, I'm grasping for energy somewhere, and it's gone.
Yeah.
And he took the team, and he was like, it's a brand new ball game. We're still in game 7, and it's tie ball game. He was like, we have better arms than they do. We have better bats than they do. We have better coaches than they do. There's no reason we should lose this game. And as soon as he said that, I was like, that's a great point. Like, not taking anything away from them. They were great, but you can't say, like, ooh, they're really good. We might not want to play. So he was like, hey, we are better than they are. Let's go beat them. And thankfully for us, Schwarber was leading off.
Yeah.
And so it was like he was riding that miracle. Like, I think he was batting 500 at the time. And
Crazy.
I'd seen a pitch all season. And I think he took live BP off guys like me, and now he's facing Corey Kluber. So it just doesn't make sense that he should be like that. And he hits a single, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, okay, there is no curse. Like, Schwarber's hitting single on a torn ACL. There is no curse. We got this. From then on out, we won the game. But, yeah, my perspective of that whole thing was like, I don't remember any time that I wasn't in the game. Like, pre-game, at home, sleeping, going home from the game. I don't remember a thing, but I remember my feelings through that 9 innings. And then it's so draining that I literally slept walk home, slept walk to the field, and then started playing again. So,
yeah.
Now there's been a couple of years, do you have more perspective on, like, realizing the magnitude of it? Like, until you're 100 years old, you're going to be a guy who was on the team that finally broke that curse.
Yeah, and I love it, and I think that, like, that's one of the greatest things that I think could ever happen to any athlete, is be a part of something like that. Like, that's very rare to have was 108 year, 106 year?
Yeah, 108, yeah.
108 year curse that is the most known curse and winless streak in history, and then it gets broken, and you're a part of that team. Like, I was very fortunate to do that, especially because I started the season in Double-A, and I was like, to my agent before the season, I was like, best case, like, I'm going to get to AAA. I'm going to show them that I belong in big league camp the next year. Like
Right.
that was my goal for the season, and then I ended up on the roster. So yeah, it ended up working out. But from like the parade standpoint, I remember the season ended, and when you're in the minor leagues, you're from November. There's a camp, and then you have December off, and then January there's a camp, and then February you have instructs, and then March is spring training. So from January to that point in time, I hadn't been home. I haven't been able to relax, do anything like that. So once we won, I remember I partied pretty hard, and I was like, I'm ready to go home.
Yeah, it's been a year.
I want to go home. And so they're like, you need to do the parade. And this is going to sound terrible, but I was like, I got to stay an extra 2 days or whatever it was, like 48 hours for a parade. I was like, I'll just look at the pictures. Not a huge deal. And that's just my naive, like not realizing how big the situation was. I was like, there'll be a couple, like maybe 20, 30,000 people there. Like it's not. And then we're on the bus and we leave Wrigley, and you can't see street. I'm like, oh, of course there's going to be a lot of people here, and then we're going to die out and we're going to get downtown. There was not a road or exit or anything that wasn't jam-packed with people.
Yeah.
And I got up on the stage and I looked out and I couldn't see anything but the tops of people's heads as far as I looked. And I was like, this is incredible.
They at the time said it was one of the largest gatherings of human beings in recorded history. It's insane.
Yeah, that's when I realized. I remember me and my buddy flew up and we drove home together. And I remember sitting in the car the first like 2 hours because I left right after the parade. And he had to drive because I was not able to at the time. But I remember sitting.
Sure, yeah.
I was quiet for about 2 hours, and finally he's like, "Man, are you all right?" And I was like, "That was incredible." And then you get to the point where you're like, "Is anything ever going to happen like that ever again?" Like, and you're trying to remember all of it. I took a bunch of video and I made sure I like downloaded it onto a USB just in case something ever happens to my iCloud or whatever. But yeah, it's like something like that is like, that's why I'd love to hear your perspective, because like it was like I was sleepwalking through it because I was so focused on baseball. Yeah. And then it kind of all hit all of us. I remember we were all kind of sitting there on stage. Once we overlooked everything, we were looking at each other like, is this real? Like, how many people do you think this is? There's no way that's over 1 million, right? And sure enough, it was.
Oh yeah, it was several million. And I mean, the Last Dance just ended, and you see all the Bulls Grant Park things, and it was bigger than any Bulls celebration ever in Grant Park.
There's a couple like tens of thousands of people at this celebration. Look how big it is, and I was like, there's 4 whatever million, however it was.
Yeah, 4 to 5 million, I think, is what the range was. Yeah, I mean, I think what you said about our perspective was, it's interesting to hear because it's similar to what you guys said in the dugout. As Cubs fans, we'd try to tell ourselves this team is the best. They're actually the best, so there's no reason they shouldn't win. And then that happens, and it's the constant cycle of like, I think we are fucked forever. And then, basically, and then it was a surprise and I think I blacked out, Adam blacked out too.
Completely.
I don't remember Kipnis's almost homer in the 9th. I don't know where I went mentally then, but yeah.
I would absolutely love to hear the perspective, because like I get asked, especially like I get asked by people all the time. I have memorabilia at my house, and it's like, hey, what was this like, or what's this jersey mean to you, or anything like that. But
well, I'll tell you, from my perspective, there was a moment in all 3 of those series where I said to myself, the curse is real. Like in the first round against the Giants, when that game 4 is just not going well, Matt Moore comes out and pitches this gem kind of out of nowhere, and you guys are down 5-2 going into the 9th, and all of a sudden, I mean, I hope you never look at it as a player, but Cubs Twitter was like the most negative place in the world, and all anybody was saying was like, it was all just like, we're gonna lose, we're gonna go home, and Cueto's gonna beat us. I can't believe this is happening again. And then obviously you guys come back in the 9th, and there were all these moments that like just when you started to doubt that team, they would prove who they really were. And I was gonna ask you, this is something I'd written down. Obviously you're with the team and on the roster in the NLCS. When you guys lose games 2 and 3 and you get shut out, are you feeling that pressure in the clubhouse? Because I mean, it was like 20 innings before Zobrist lays down that bunt and you guys start getting rolling. But like, could you feel it like palpably in the clubhouse of everyone having this like nervous energy almost?
Yeah, and it's super magnified at that time, which is why like they say like players show up in the playoffs, or they're not a playoff team, and it sounds dumb because it's the same exact game.
Right.
Stuff gets magnified so much. Like you lose a game like we lost where Josh Tomlin shut us out in the World Series. And
yeah, I was there.
Dang it, like we got to face him again, and we got to face Kluber 2 more times. And so like you just start getting everything sucked out of you. But I will tell you, when we went down 3-1 and they interviewed all our players, it was like, we're going to come back, we're going to win the next game, and like we got to regroup, whatever it was. When you interviewed their team, it was like, we got Kluber in Game 7.
Right.
They went to Kipnis, and Kipnis was like, hey, we got Kluber coming back Game 7.
Mm-hmm.
And you started getting the vibe that they didn't fully trust that they were going to win 5 and 6. And
right.
For us, like Arrieta went out there in 6, and we kind of stepped on their throats in both of those games, and we had all the momentum going into 7. But it was true. Kluber was coming back in, but he'd throw out, it was game, 3 days off, game, 3 days off, game, which as a starting pitcher is like the equivalent of playing 7 consecutive football games. Like there's just no way you can do that successfully. And so they were waiting for Game 7 is what the vibe that I got. And it could have been way wrong, but that's kind of what I was hearing. It was like the media was really pushing like, hey, they have Kluber in Game 7. I was like, there's 2 more before that.
Yeah. They're allowed to win either of the ones before it, but yeah.
If I remember correctly, there are 2 more, and we got Arrieta on 6. But yeah, when Tomlin shut us out, he threw against Arrieta, and like Arrieta was our better, I thought, pitcher. Like Lester's our better playoff pitcher. He showed that like he's one of the greatest playoff pitchers to ever walk the face of the earth. Yeah. Like that year, Arrieta's stuff was incredible, and like he came off the Cy Young the year before, so it was like 2 aces going back to back. And so Arrieta threw Game 2. When Tomlin beat us Game 3 or 4, I can't remember what it was.
Game 3, yeah.
Game 3, I remember that sucked a lot of air out of my sails, at least. I was sitting there, I was like, man, we just got shut out at home against Josh Tomlin, who's a great pitcher, but like, he's not Corey Kluber. He wasn't he wasn't one of those guys that I expected to beat us just off of his bat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Hendricks was great in that game. He only gave up 1 run, but
he was.
Yeah, and even like I was, my brothers and my mom and I went to that game, and we were trying to. The tickets were pretty pricey, and as we were leaving, we were trying to be like, well, you know, it's fine. We saw it was still an amazing thing to be at, and it's only 2-1. Game 4 was depressing. As fans were like, that was just extremely sad. And I think it was on Halloween, or there were at least Halloween parties in Chicago, because Adam and I are both in New York, but I went back to Chicago for the series. And I remember walking around being depressed and seeing just like thousands of girls dressed like Harley Quinn that year. And it's just like very surreal, like Halloween drunkenness with just deep sadness mixed into it. Was a crazy place to be. But yeah, like you said, then after 4, I guess it's like it gets so low that you're like, well, nothing to lose now, you know.
It couldn't have gotten lower for us, which I think is great. By the way, sad Halloween drunk might be the worst sounding drunk that I've ever heard in my life.
It's not great.
There's nothing funnier to witness as a sober person than a drunk Halloween crying fight.
Exactly. Oh, yeah. That's exactly where I would have been had I gone out that.
Yeah.
Anyway, and it's Halloween, so.
Yeah, it was and I had the fortune of being at Game 5, and it felt at that time that was like the longer the series went on, the more not only momentum you guys had, but it just logistically benefited you because the Indians were pitching so shorthanded.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of why that, because to your point, like when you're pitching games 1, 4, and 7, like Kluber did, it doesn't matter how good you are, you're going to get worn out at some point.
Yeah, you're not going to be the best all 3 times, which he was his best Game 1. That was the only time my whole life I've ever seen guys come in and they're like, we can't hit that.
Yeah. Except Schwarber, who hasn't hit all year, almost hitting a home run off the guy.
I haven't seen a pitch in 10 years, but
it's ridiculous.
Threw a front hit 2-seam to Cogman. I wish I could pull up the video right now. Literally, I thought I was going to hit Cogman in the ribs and came back to the center of the plate. Not like not the corner, like to the center of the plate. Cogman bails out, the catcher doesn't move. And I think that was like the 4th or 5th, and I was like, might want to go get him tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is the loudest that you remember Wrigley being during that run? In my mind, I would assume it's either the Montero Grand Slam or even like the last home run in Game 1. Yeah.
Montero Grand Slam by far. And I was in the bullpen for that warming up, and it was Rondon and me, and it was like any situation in which we need to win the game, Rondon's in. Anything else, Rob can go in.
Mhm.
And so I'm like, okay, great. Like,
Yeah. So then that grand slam changes your plans for the evening too.
as soon as that ball got hit, I sat down. I was like, I'm done for the night. Like, yeah, as soon as he hit that, like I lost track of the ball because it got so loud and there was so much movement that I don't know if I took my eye off it for a second, but I lost track. And so I picked up the right fielder, and he knew it was gone.
Mhm.
And that's when it was just like the happiest feeling of your life too, because that was a huge moment. Like that's like,
Oh yeah.
that's how you start the series off. Like it was monstrous. And he hit that ball a mile. And so as soon as he hit it, everyone could get loud, because before it was like you hit a wall script, like Javi's home run against Cueto. Like that ball was an inch away from being caught and an inch away from being a homer. Like it was that close. And
Right.
when he hit that, it's like nervous energy, like, oh. But when Montero hit it, it's immediate, like ecstatic. And it was the
Right.
loudest I've ever heard.
That affects the big pop when everyone knows immediately. It's like you can get there's not tension. It's all celebratory right away. And Montero also, I mean, underrated game-winning RBI, obviously, but also underrated home run pose and / trot. I mean, a great casual turn and spin. A lot of swag on that pose by Miggy.
His home run lean is one of the most iconic to me because I saw it in person in that big moment. Like his hit, like home run lean, is pretty sexy.
Oh, it's
for sure.
Extremely sexy.
I think the most underrated element of Montero that whole playoffs is getting Chapman through the bottom of the ninth in Game 7.
No,
People overlook that, and to be able to get through that inning without, I mean, I can't imagine what that was like mentally for either of them.
No, I can state more often. I've told so many people this, but like Chapman was emotional after the 8th inning.
Mm-hmm.
He was emotional after the 9th inning, like tears in his eyes. He wasn't like bawling, crying. He's a big man. I don't think he ever would cry like that, but he's like tears in his eyes. You can see it welling up. And that guy wanted to win more than anyone else I've ever played with in my life. Like, he's icing his knees after every outing, and they're like, "Hey, Chap, are you good?" And he never once was like, "Yeah, I'm good." He was always like, "Great. If you need me here." And I was like, "Man, you're not great, but that's awesome that you're going to say that." And he, anytime they handed him the ball, he went. I remember once I think we were up like 6 against the Dodgers. And something happened in the 8th where like they got like bases loaded and like the heart of their lineup was about to come up, and I was warming up to go clean up the 9th. And so I'm like, oh yeah, I'll finish this game off, and no problem. And I remember they put him in the game, and you could tell he didn't want to be in because he wanted the day off, and we had a 6-run lead. But the first thing he did is he grabbed his weighted ball and he didn't say anything. He didn't like, I don't want to go in today. And he went and he closed out that game, and he never said no. And like that's something I learned from him and Wade Davis, where you want to be an elite closer, you got to be able to go in at any point of any game, no matter what, how you're feeling, anything. And like, yeah, I can't say enough about Aroldis Chapman.
Yeah, I mean, Chapman and Davis are both nails, and I mean, I'm very lucky. I've gotten to go to a couple playoff games. So I was at Game 5 of the World Series, but I was also at that insane Game 5 in 2017 where Wade Davis goes against the Nats and just puts it all out there. And they're very similar appearances, really. I mean, I think they both got 8 outs, which is way more than you would usually ask either of them. And I think it speaks to both of their toughness to get through that.
Yeah, at that point in the season too, you are running on fumes. They said in the Jordan documentary all the time, like that team was out of gas. And it's a little older, but that's how you feel. Like I remember after that season ended, usually I like wait a couple days, do a small little workout because I don't want to just nothing and then start. And I remember I didn't move for a week. Like I played Assassin's Creed Black Flag, I believe, start to finish. I don't think I got up until the game was over.
That's a good game for just to shut out the world for a while. Yeah, get the Final Fantasy and Mass Effect in. Just sit down. I mean, at that point, that's 179 games into the year in that World Series year, not counting spring training. I mean, you're like, it's a 200 plus. I mean, that's more work days than a lot of people have just in general. So yeah, it makes sense that everyone's out of gas.
Yeah, and that speaks to Joe, how he rested his players. Like we were ready to go, and had he been like, you know what, Rizzo played every single day except for 3, I think Rizzo doesn't play as well as he does, or Javi doesn't light up the playoffs like he did, because he was at 100% because he was kind of platooning the whole season. Like, he was all over the place, and doing anything they asked, and he was ready for the playoffs. And like hats off to Joe for having everybody ready too.
Yeah, thank God for American Legion Week.
Exactly. There you
go. You got anything else, Kevin?
No, I think I'm pretty good. I guess I was going to ask, where's the do you have a special spot for that ring, that the World Series ring?
So my house in Arizona, I had it like in a little safe. And then I thought to myself, like, you can just pick up the safe and leave.
Right.
True. Yeah.
It's not nailed down. So I'm like, oh, you can't grab my ring. They're like, yeah, okay. And they just take it.
Right.
I put it in the safety deposit box for a bit, and right now it is here in my house in Austin, and it's in a bolted down safe.
There you go. So they'd have to take the whole house.Ey'd have to put it on rollers, get the logs one in front of another, and harder to make a surreptitious getaway.
Yeah, it's not going to be quick. They take it, it's going to take a while.
Yeah, that's good. They got to work for it.
They got to take the whole house.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's all I got, Adam.
The ring was gone in the house right now. Anyway, that thing for me, like, I've never worn it though. I was like, I'm going to wear it to my wedding. I'm going to wear it to the Cubs convention. I'm going to wear it to this. And it's such a big ring.
It's gigantic.
It's like, you just feel like kind of a jackass wearing it. You're like,
yeah.
Thing on your hand. Like, I don't know what to do with this thing. So I just have it nice and put away. I'd love to one day like display it. I just don't know how to. I'd have to put like a security system and stuff in it because, man, that thing's, it really is.
Yeah, you'd have to have the lasers around it basically to keeping it safe.
I think maybe you throw it on a necklace while you're rapping and shagging fly balls.
Yeah, shagging fly balls with my necklace here.
Yeah, some serious ice. Yeah.
Or you have to punch someone in the face like Ace Ventura to see if any of the diamonds are missing.
Dude, I would lose a fight, so I can't do it. Unless I fight by one, I'm losing that fight 10 times.
Oh, man. Rob, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. This is awesome.
Yeah, this is great. Is there anything you want to plug? Anywhere people can find you in particular? Anything you want to call attention to?
I need to be more active on social media, that's for sure. My wife does like Instagram stuff, and she's got these posts lined up for every day, making sure everything's right. I'm like, that's a pretty cool clip of me getting a hit, post it. I don't have any thought going on, but I do want to ask you guys, so as far as like nerves and everything goes for like pitching in front of people, it's my job, so it's different than if you were to take the mound at Wrigley Field, you'd probably be freaking out. Mm-hmm. How is it when you get on stage as a comedian? Like, what are those nerves like?
Well, I think it's sort of like, it's a little bit like you describing the nerves around singing on the bus being greater than taking the mound at Coors. For us, I think it's like, since it is what we do, I'm much more nervous about like doing karaoke than I am about doing stand up for a theater of 800 or whatever, like that's, so I think it's just, it's that difference between what if it's what you do, you're automatically less nervous at it because you actually have confidence, how to, you have an idea how this is going to go, kind of.
And sometimes, and I think sometimes people like us as baseball fans, like we're almost more nervous for you guys than you are on the mound or at the plate. Whereas same sort of thing, like when I've done big shows, I've had people be like, oh, I was like so nervous for you. It's like, oh, I was fine because this is my element. But I think it's the same. It's like repetition. You've been playing baseball your whole life, I assume. And Kevin and I have been doing stand-up for a long time. I think early on you feel a lot more nervous, but the more you've done it, it's like anything else. Like the more hours you put into it, the less you even think about it.
Yeah, I think my thing is like I'll get aggressive about, I don't like waiting around. Like if I'm there, I want to go up, like I don't like waiting to go in. And I guess like,
I'm sitting there, I'm like, it's 3:00. I'm pitching at 7. Like, what am I doing here?
Yeah, it's hard to, I've never gotten great about doing like living my life otherwise before a big show. Like what I did stand up on the Letterman show. And when I did that, it's like, I got nothing else to do that day, but I can't just like read a book or have lunch. It's like, you got to wait.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think I do exactly what you did in the Cubs clubhouse, Rob, which is like anytime I've ever been on a set for like a commercial or something, if I don't know people, I'm just hanging out by the craft food table eating things.
Yeah, it's perfect. Yeah, that's what you got to do. And I'm sure the food's great there too. Yeah, in the Wrigley clubhouse, it's so good too. It's like in AAA, it's you have steak tonight, and then tomorrow's chicken, and then it's pork. Mm-hmm. The big league clubhouse, there's a chef that's like, what do you want?
Yeah. Oh man, that's yeah. that's a whole different series of
Yeah, I
choices
always
you have to
imagine
make
that's a
all of a
big
sudden.
jump from going to like, from minor league, like Holiday Inn Express continental breakfast to like, oh, here is your chef.
Yeah, that's it's definitely a change for sure. But it's also crazy. Like this is the last thing. I know you guys probably have stuff to do too. But
Oh no, please.
you get so used to stuff too. So like I showed up, and I'll never forget the story. It's a pretty good one. I showed up to Colorado, and I take BP, well, I shag BP, sing rap songs and everything.
Sure. Yeah. Drop a few bars. Yeah.
And it's time to eat. So I sit in my locker while everyone, like the crowd's there, because I don't want to be in anybody's way. You know, it's my first day in the big league. So I go up there, and the only one sitting there, Anthony Rizzo, Aroldis Chapman, and his translator. And so Rizzo and Chapman are talking, and I'm just up there, and it's like pizza, and then there's lasagna, and then there's chicken parmesan. So it's like you're at an Italian restaurant in front of you. This is great. So I'm getting a little bit of spaghetti, a little bit of this, slice of pizza. I'm feeling pretty good about myself. Every snack you could ever imagine. And Anthony Rizzo turns to me and he's like, "Hey, is that a pretty good spread?" And I'm like, "This is the greatest spread I've ever seen in my whole life." He, straight face, like not a joke, nothing. He goes, "This is the worst spread in the league." And like you just get so used to like greatness there. It's like the things that are usually great take a step down to things that are newly great, and
Right.
it's awesome. And like for me, I think the hardest part was like I was going from Iowa to Chicago a bunch, and it was like first class flight out. You're riding coach back.
Sure.
It's like, that's exactly how I describe it. And then you show up, you got this big fat locker, like everything. Like you'd literally sit in your locker, and the clubby would tap you on the shoulder and be like, "Hey, do you need anything?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I need a brand new pair or a brand new jacket." He's like, "All right." And 30 seconds later, you got one. The minor was like, "Hey, I need a new jacket." They're like, "The team store's probably got some you can order." Like,
Yeah, we'll give you a 2% off discount.
Yeah. Yeah. Here's a Groupon.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's crazy how like everything just changes, and like I tried to stay very middle because of it, but it is true. Like I flew first class for 3 years, and then like last year, and I would get like a middle seat. I'd sit there, I'm like, used to fly first class. Here I am, trying not to be like that guy, but
yeah,
everything changes.
Yeah, it's a very distinct line for sure.
Yeah,
that's great.
Well, listen, we really appreciate your time, man. It's a pleasure talking to you, and everybody, follow Rob. His wife's she's gonna bolster up his social media. I did see a pretty sweet Instagram story of you making homemade almond milk, so I think you're killing it.
Yeah. I got some of those quarantine tips.
Hell yeah, yeah.
We enjoyed it. But follow us at Away Games Pod as always on Twitter and Instagram. Rob, thank you again, man.
Yeah, no, thank you guys. I enjoyed it.